Hi, this video is going to show you how to use some database features to create your reference entry and also just provide you with some quick reminders. So if you are working in a database, they often have a CITE feature for you. So the way you're going to use that is just simply click CITE. In SIRS, MLA is the default, so we're going to change that to APA 7 because that's the style we use. I'm going to select copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste it onto my reference page. However, this has errors, and it is your job as the writer to correct the errors. So first of all, I don't need the ampersand. Second of all, APA only uses the first initial of the author's last name. Then we need the full spelling of the month. Now I have to take a look at the title. APA only capitalizes the first word of the title, the first word of a subtitle, the first word of any proper nouns. And so in this particular title, there's no subtitle, there's no proper noun, so I need to lowercase it. Then I am going to delete the database URL. The reason for that is because that database URL is only useful to someone who has paid access to the database. And that's just not the case with SIRS. So we're just going to delete that URL. Now, if I'm working in EBSCOhost, I have the same button, except it's up here. The nice part here is their default style is already APA, so I'm just going to copy to my clipboard. The author's last name for this article is Carter, so alphabetically that's going to come first. And when I take a look at it, I can see the proper usage of the author, the month, the day, the year. We capitalize the first word of the title. We capitalize the first word of the subtitle. NFL is short for the National Football League. That's a proper noun, so it should stay capitalized. And there's no URL to get rid of. So that looks really good. If I'm using something like PubMed, they also have a cite button right here. The format is going to be down here in the lower right. Please make sure you have selected APA. I think the default usually lands me at this NLM, but don't copy that. We need APA. So I'm going to copy APA, and again, I'm going to put it in alphabetical order and paste it. This is really good. All the author's last names and initials. The year, we have the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine position statement, concussion in sports. I'm actually going to leave this capitalized. That is the name of an organization, hence it is a proper noun, so it should be capitalized. I do need to capitalize the word concussion because this indicates a subtitle, concussion in sports. One error I frequently see on this type of database is they do not capitalize all of the words in the name of the source itself, which we do need to capitalize the name of the source. And then we have the volume, issue, pages, and DOI. Leave all of that alone. That's exactly what we want. Now, one thing I will warn you of is when you are searching the internet for sources, and let's say, So one thing I would make sure that you understand is that if you are going to use a citation generator to help you create your reference entries for your internet sources, you need to be aware that those citation generators often use the URL to create the reference entry. And the problem is if all you do is paste the URL and let the generator create the reference for you, it will call this article a web page, when in fact Delaware Online is the web presence of the Delaware News Journal, which is actually a newspaper. And when we are working in APA, APA does differentiate between different types of sources. So if I'm looking at my APA reference guide and I am looking at the page about how to create a references page, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to see that I need to know what type of source I am dealing with. So the Delaware Online, or the News Journal, is actually a newspaper. So that is the example I need to follow. So if you are looking at a newspaper article directly on the newspaper's website itself, so this is not in a database, this is directly on their website. Oops, where am I? I am going to use this format right here with the author, the date, the title of the article, the name of the newspaper, and then the link. The ones that have letters and numbers, that's if you are looking at the actual printed copy of the newspaper itself. when I'm looking at this, I need to make sure I follow punctuation, capitalization, italic font versus regular font. I have to make sure that all of that is accurate on my references page, because even if the citation generator gives me something to copy and paste, it doesn't necessarily differentiate between different types of sources like APA does. So here's an example of another article, but this particular article is only found online. Okay, this is from Midwest Orthopedic Specialty Hospital. So this is just a website. So when I'm selecting the format that I want to follow for this one, I would select a web page. And don't worry so much about the different types. This particular web page has an individual author. So I can see I'll do the author, the date, the title, the name of the website, and then the link. But notice here, when you're using a web page only source, you put the title in italic font and the name of the website in regular font. Whereas if you're doing a newspaper, journal, or magazine, the title is in regular font and the name of the publication is in italic font. So APA does have some slight differences in reference formats depending on the type of source it is. So if I wasn't sure what type of source Delaware Online is, I can just Google and say, what type of source is the Delaware News Journal? And I can see it's a daily newspaper and news website. But as soon as I see this word newspaper, that's how I'm going to decide which format I follow. So please keep in mind, use the tools that are available to you, but ultimately what goes on your reference page needs to follow the APA rules that are given to you in our APA resources in the course, not just whatever the database gives you or not just whatever the reference generator gives you. The last thing I would remind you of is, remember, alphabetical order. Everything needs to be double spaced, so just check your line spacing. And then if you don't have a hanging indent where the first line is at the margin and subsequent lines are indented, then all you have to do is go up here and select hanging, and it will create the hanging indent. Well, you have to highlight all of them and then do your hanging. So that way I know my reference page is accurate. In addition, the last thing I'll remind you of, if you have this first paper requires 2 sources, the next paper requires 2 sources, future papers are going to require more than 2 sources. However many sources that you are required to use, anytime you have a reference entry listed on your references page, you have to make sure you also have a matching in-text citation. So when you are looking at the APA reference guide, make sure you look at in-text citations for direct quotes, in-text citations when you paraphrase, which when we write, almost everything should be paraphrased, and then some examples, and then what to do. What if the source you're looking at legitimately does not have a date? Well, you still have to note that. What if it doesn't have a named author? Well, be careful, because a lot of times you're looking at an organizational author. And then what if you have multiple authors? What do you do with 2 authors? How do you do a citation for 3 authors or more? So please make sure that you are reviewing the resources that are provided for you, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.